All right. Hi, everyone. We are here today with Dr. Elliots Hedman, who is the founder of Wonder Stories. He has a PhD from the Media Lab at MIT in Media Arts and Science. And I know Elliot from way back when he was a student, actually, and was doing physiological research on the children in our therapy sessions, which we have submitted for publication and hopefully will be accepted in the near future. Welcome, Elliot. I know you're going to talk to us a little bit about Wonder Stories and its applicability to children with sensory processing challenges. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about your journey and kind of how your experiences at the STAR Institute maybe shaped where you are today with this product.
If you were to ask me about 7 years ago when we started, Elliot, are you going to be making books? I would have been like, no, I'm an engineer, Sarah. Why would I be making books? That makes no sense. But when I started out, I had an electrical computer engineering degree, and we brought these sensors in and we gave them to kids with sensory challenges. And I was the machine learning person, but the therapist started teaching me a whole bunch about what's the emotional experience like. And in therapy, we learned about how stressful it could be to be on a swing or how calming it can be to be in a ball pit. And I started to look at the world in a really different light working with you guys. I started seeing that, if we understand kids' internal states, their emotional states, we can make better experiences for them. And we started out looking at how to make better therapies. But then after that, I looked at how do we make a better experience playing with Lego bricks? And how do we make better board games? And I started asking all these questions in all these spaces. And one of the big ones that I found was that there's a lot of kids with sensory challenges and other kids who really struggle with reading. They don't like it. It's really hard for them to begin that reading experience. And as us adults, it's really hard for us to understand that, those first few steps can be really hard. And so I found myself more and more interested in how do we create a good reading experience.
Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. And I think, as you get into sharing with us a little bit more about Wonder Stories, you have an interactive component that really builds on the relationship between the child and whoever the adult usually is who's reading with them. Is that correct?
So the research I've done for the last about 4 years has been working with kids who don't like reading. And one of the challenges, they don't usually get to have that one-on-one relationship with their teacher or with their therapist because, they're in front of a screen, especially with remote learning right now. How is a kid who's supposed to read when their teacher isn't even in the room with them? So I think relationships are really, really important for creating that great reading experience. But now that we're in a remote learning space or in a digital space, those relationships aren't there a lot of times. A lot of the teachers I worked with, they would be checking their email or just going around and looking at websites while their kids were reading on their own. So the social element really can disappear when we're in a digital space.
Right, but I think right now, as you've talked about, because kids are doing all of their educational activities at home, that in fact the parents or grandparents, depending on who's in the house, are really serving as that relationship vehicle, and really, that is what we do in our practice, is really capitalize on the motivation and the joy within that relationship to support, whether in our case it might be independence in dressing, and in your case it's being able to experience a joyful successful reading opportunity, that in both of those examples we are wanting to tap a more positive emotional experience from the child.
Oh, absolutely. Wouldn't it be great if every time they had reading, they could have an occupational therapist there giving them the same kind of reinforcement you give in therapy? But to your point, and I was kind of surprised about this, I learned this a little bit later on after working at the STAR Center, is that we tell parents, hey, it's really important when you're growing up with your kids to read with them every night. And I always assumed that was because, you need to expose them to words, expose them to stories, which is partly true. But the more I looked into it and the more I read the research, what you're really doing is you're tying reading with the relationship of spending time with mom and dad.
Yes.
So every time I get a read, I get my mom sitting there and telling me that and telling me I'm a good reader, or having a discussion with me. And that connection, that emotional connection, is really strong. But the funny part is, that goes to about kindergarten. But when you look at a second grader or a third grader, they're still looking for that relationship, and they need it even more, because it's a lot harder to not just listen to one, but actually have to decode a story by yourself and understand it. And so that relationship's even more important, but a lot of times either the parents or teachers aren't there in the ways that they could be. And so yes, 100% reading is a social activity, but I think most people have forgotten that as they get older.
Yeah, and like I was saying, I think as occupational therapists, and also especially now in the age of telehealth, the parent is the one who is addressing all of the needs of the child, both educational as well as daily life activities and routines and play activities.
Yep.
And I think that element is it more important, really, even in the success of any of our programs. So with that said, tell us a little bit about how Wonder Stories is motivating, positively reinforcing, all of the components that make it a more successful reading experience for some kids.
Yeah, and so I go back to what reading was like for me as a kindergarten. Now, I was kind of a nerd. I was more into math, and I always was more into math. I don't know, that's probably going to surprise some of you, but but when I was reading as a kid, my favorite book was a book called Where's Waldo.
Mm-hmm.
And in Where's Waldo, there's really no text at all. It's just a giant picture with a whole bunch of images, and you have to go find Waldo. And every day I would go with my mom and I'd show her where Waldo was. And what was really cool about that experience is that I got to have a conversation with my mom and show her that I'm capable of finding Waldo. I was actually probably pretty good at comprehending books and understanding pretty complicated text for my age, but my parents never really acknowledged that, right? There was never like, wow, Elliot, you read this book that's a level G and you're only supposed to be at a level B. That conversation doesn't happen for a kid. But oh my God, you're better at finding Waldo than Dad. Like, that's a real thing.
Right.
That's not to say that the solution is to give kids only Where's Waldo books, but what we do is we put in our books these moments of challenges. So you got to solve problems, you got to solve mysteries. So there's an egg in my bedroom. Who put it there? Or I think my mom might be lying to me. How do I figure out if she's lying? So you give the kids problems to solve, and then they actually are asked about how to solve them, and they solve them, and they get immediate feedback after solving them. And this creates a moment of celebration for both the caretaker and the kid. They get to be excited because they're succeeding. They get to identify as great readers.
Right, and we call those magic moments that we transfer from the therapist who's working with a child to the parent to experience that shared joy over the child's accomplishment. But I know the other principle that really underlies the STAR frame of reference is this idea of regulation and being in that ideal regulated state for learning. Whether it's learning to read, learning to do math problems, learning to dress yourself, as we said before. So I know that because of your background in physiological research, you have an example of a physiological response to reading a regular book and versus reading one of the Wonder Stories. Do you think you could share that with us?
Yeah, and so before I go on, I just want to make sure anyone watching knows what we're talking about. So Sarah, I definitely want to show you a little bit about the emotional experience. But before we go into that, I'd like to kind of show the audience a little bit about what Wonder Stories looks like, or what's going on when they're reading a book.
Great.
So we're going to read a little bit of The Missing Moon. Question 1, what is missing in my room? Parents get really upset when we ask questions before we give them any answers, but this helps prompt the kids and get them focused. Today is science day at school. I need to pack my notebook, my pencil, my smartphone, my science book, and my moon. I can't wait to take the moon I made to class. It's an exact copy of an actual moon. It has real craters and everything. I look inside my backpack, but something is missing. We got a little image here. And whenever we read with this, kids are like, oh, I know it's the moon. I know the moon's missing. Question 1, what is missing from my backpack? And we'll guess correctly here that it's the moon. And then we get a little dinosaur dancing with us here and telling us where we're correct. We just can keep going. The big
And will
question,
you
where is
share
my
with
moon?
us, Elliot, will you share with us also what happens if they're incorrect?
Oh yeah, you guys want to get a wrong answer? So we'll zoom through here. This question is, what's a clue for what might be going on? It's the little boy down here, but we'll guess the lampshade is the clue for who might have taken it. We get a big wrong sign with a dinosaur.
Did you click on the image? I'm not sure. How did you respond to the?
Oh, you can't see my mouse? Yeah, so with the image questions, you can actually click on different parts of the image to answer the questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the basis of Wonder Stories. It's fairly simple, but I wanted you guys to see how it feels like a very different book.
Can you read one more segment of it?
Oh, sure. Well, let's see. Miles is now talking about dogs. Let's skip this section because I've already read half of it. Okay, this is a fun part. So she now knows the dog took her moon, and she has to explore. Aha, our dog Cookie must have taken the moon to play fetch with. I just have to find Cookie, and that will lead me right to the moon. I might not even be late for school. I go downstairs to the living room. The room is a mess. On the floor, on the couch, all over the place are brown, money dog prints. Mom is going to be so upset. I'm in so much trouble. Question 4, where did Cookie go with the moon? Sarah, you want to guess this one?
To the kitchen.
You're going to guess wrong, to the kitchen? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Here, I'll give you the audio feedback on this one too.
Oh, yes. Good. All right. To my room.
Okay, you're going to keep guessing them wrong?
Yeah, I want to see so I can celebrate when it's right.
Okay.
I'll let you guess the next one.
Right, I'm going to guess outside. Sometimes when we interview kids, they like to do this, but it's actually amazing. Even kids as low as preschool can comprehend these questions and figure them out. It's not, their deduction skills are pretty high, even if their reading skills are low.
So tell me, what age group is this type of story designed for?
So originally, we were really looking at this pain point of learning to read on your own. And that's your second and third graders, typical second or third graders, having to learn how to read a book for about 15 minutes a day. And so that's who we were targeting. But now what we've discovered is that if a parent's reading with the kids, preschoolers and kindergartners also are loving this book as well, because they get to have these fun interactions in this guided reading that's very different than a normal book.
So it's part of it is the ability to be interactive in the experience.
Yeah.
That motivates them to continue.
It's kind of, I imagine this kind of thing would be nice in some occupational therapy places, that the parents want to be involved. They want to have a way to have a conversation with their kids while they're reading. But how are you supposed to have a conversation with a book? That's not actually an easy thing to figure out how to do. And so this book just makes it a more natural experience to have a guided reading where we talk about things and we celebrate successes together. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback at that younger age. Except,
and Elliot, as I was looking at that, there are many aspects of that book that actually could be enacted by the child. So after they read it, they could go get their backpack. And
oh, wow, yeah.
They could have a picture of the moon, and there could be a hide and seek game, like in the house. The moon's missing, but where is it? Let's go find it.
I like this idea of like continuing with imaginary play. That would be really fun, to say the least.
Yeah, and because embodied within that story is an imaginary experience that you could recreate, which would be really fun as a follow-up and building on that relationship between the parent and the child.
Yeah, absolutely. We are just now starting to explore how to foster this relationship more. We wrote a little tiny article, we haven't even shared it yet, about best practices on connecting more with your kids around books, because with everyone stuck at home, it's now become a really interesting question. How can I read more with my kid? Especially grandparents. Grandparents have been very excited about, wait, I want to help with my kid's school right now. How could I do it? So we're exploring that day by day, to say the least.
Yeah, no, that's great. Very creative. I know that you have some physiology comparing the experience reading a traditional book versus a one of your books. So I'd like to see that data as well.
Yeah. All right. Sarah, you're the only person who says I'd like to see that data, which I appreciate because that is correct. But you're the only one who references those data. The funny part is Sarah helped me figure out how to measure this data a long time ago. But,
well, I think most people will enjoy looking at this anyway. So.
Yes. Okay. So this is the emotional experience of a third grade English language learner as he's reading The Voyage of the Dr. Dolittle. And this is his skin conductance. Oh my God, I know I'm going to be called out on having to make sure I describe what that is in this setting. Skin conductance is a marker of the sympathetic nervous system. Now, if you care about sensory challenges, that's very closely related to arousal. So when you're getting excited or you're getting overwhelmed, those are all going to be high, and we'll see those in little spikes here, like the ones up there. Those are moments when they're becoming more aroused. And now if you're at the other end, and I remember the Star Center calling it the Eeyore end of this story, which is the low arousal end, you don't see that in skin conductance, you just see it going down. You don't see any spikes. It's just a constantly fading line here. So as you can probably imagine, in this story here, we have the kid kind of getting excited as he starts reading Dr. Dolittle. But about 7 minutes in, he and Dr. Dolittle are not the best of friends. In fact, I went back into the research space, and there was actually a big glob of drool right on the front page. And I was like, okay. I'm like, well, that could explain your emotional experience you had reading a book. Now, you might think, and like this bothers me, this is why I like so much working with the Star Center, is like teachers will immediately look at this and say, well, this kid is lazy, this kid's stupid, this kid doesn't know how to be disciplined enough to read. And I hear this and I see that a lot, and I see the kids identifying with this, but I don't believe that at all. In fact, this kid's incredibly motivated. It's just this book is really boring. It really comes down to, it's like, yeah, adults would be bored too at this point in time. So let's not look at it that way, and let's look at it, and this is what the Star Center taught me, is why don't we look at how to change the environment? Like, okay, if he's not aroused, if it's hard to pay attention to this, let's look at a different way of presenting it to him. And so we showed him Wonder Stories, which we went through before, and we had him read the same day Wonder Stories. And this is a graph of Wonder Stories. Each one of those little spikes are a moment when he's getting excited, he's leaning in, he's cognitively thinking, he's super engaged at this point in time. And yeah, and so it's just like a night and day difference that we're getting between these two books.
Yeah, and you know, we talk about arousal a lot in our OT sessions, where it's that just right challenge, where just as you described, the your physiology is elevated because you're engaged, you're getting motivated, you're excited, as opposed to that declining graph that you just showed, where the arousal is so low that it's not optimal for any sort of positive learning experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And now you just made me wonder, and I haven't really explored this. What if we have a person who's like oversensitive, gets too excited too quickly? But in the reading space, I haven't found that yet. I haven't found that kid who gets too excited by reading that we have to help him calm down. But it's an interesting question nonetheless.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. Well, that can be on your list.
My to-do list. If someone has a kid who's way too excited with reading, let me know, and then we can look at what happens with Wonder Stories with that kid.
Yeah, that's great. So how are you making these available to people, and what is your kind of your repertoire, or how many books do you have available should people want to access them?
So right now, Wonder Stories is 100% free. We're just trying to get out, especially for those kids who struggle with reading. We want to make sure they all have access to books that they love right now. So you can just go to our website, wonderstories.app, or look in either Android or iPhone. You can download it, or you can email me and I'll make sure you have access if for whatever reason. But that's how you get them. We have 20 books in there right now. We're looking at making another 100 this summer. So it's going to be a long haul of building a lot of, they're really hard stories to write because they don't look like normal books. You have to ask questions, and you have to do mysteries that are actually interesting to solve, and not just tell them on the last page it was the guy in the mask the whole time. But so lots of work on our end. But right now, yeah, you have about 6 or 7 hours of reading that you can just easily access.
Can you repeat the website or the
Yeah.
app that you have?
Yeah, so it's called wonderstories.app, WONDERSTORIES.app. And maybe we'll put a link somewhere around there. But
Okay. Yes, we can do that actually. I can do that when we
yeah.
post this. And sorry, I just sort of lost my train of thought. So I'll edit
Oh, you're fine. Very like the editing part. I like the natural. Whatever.
it. What what if anything haven't we covered that I could ask you, like, where you're going to go
Oh,
with
yeah.
this? The other thing I was actually wondering about that I was going to ask was, do copyright laws prevent you from being able to take the story, let's say, of Dr. Dolittle and put it into a Wonder format?
We're looking at talking to people. My number one is Roald Dahl books. I'd love to get them in here, but copyright is 100% in that space.
Yeah.
So it's going to be more partnership with some of these bigger publishers that are going to take a long time and they go a little bit slow, and they might not necessarily understand how important it is that kids enjoy reading in a different kind of way. So one step at a time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. So is there anything that I missed that we should include before we?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess if there's one thing I wanted to mention here is the reason I reached out to you, Sarah, is that what I've been finding is that we get about 10, 15 teachers who sign up daily to Wonder Stories, but about half of those teachers who are signing up that reach out to me, they're special education teachers. And I was a little surprised by that because, it's been a while since I was at the Star Center and really focused on sensory challenges. But I talked to these teachers and I asked what's going on. And they told me that I have many stories of kids who have trouble focusing, that they have trouble paying attention, and that Wonder Stories is a great way for kids who don't want to focus to really care and really to hone in and to start paying attention. I have one story of a kid with autism who refused to read any books at all, and now he just reads Wonder Stories over and over again. In fact, it was one of the first teachers I met because she's like, please make more. We're just reading the same story over and over again. So I think a lot of the things I learned at the Star Center when we ingrained them into books turned into a really magical space where we can give those feelings of accomplishment. We can get those kids at that just right level, and we can get them identifying as a reader. So thank you guys so much for teaching me all that a long time ago.
So along those same lines, Elliot, what I was just thinking as you were talking, one of the goals that we have is to help children recognize when they have sensory differences, that their physiology is different, that there's nothing wrong with them, but that they can advocate for themselves. I
Oh,
don't
wow.
like being in a room with that smell, or it's hard for me in the cafeteria because there's so many people talking. And I wonder if you can think about a story, a Wonder Story that is specific to some of the symptoms and behaviors that kids that we work with tend to display in a positive light. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying, I need to go to a quieter room because this is a hard place for me to be.
Yeah.
Have a picture of a big cafeteria room, or a picture of being in a quiet space. Which space did Johnny find was more comfortable for him?
Well, to double it down, and I'm just trying to think which story would be best to put this in. We could actually ask the question, okay, I'm really overwhelmed right now. I'm over aroused and things are really intense. Like, click on the things in the environment that I might want to change, or like, what kind of noises might be making it so it's hard for me to focus right now?
Yeah.
And like letting kids have that agency and control about what's going on.
Absolutely. And it will help them better understand their differences, so that they can learn strategies either to self-regulate or to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, I love that self-advocate. In the reading space, I mean, the argument we're saying is it's not that you don't enjoy reading, you just haven't found a good book.
Right.
And I believe that in the sensory space, it's very similar to that story.
Yes, it really is about staying positive, and using more of a strength-based approach, that kids feel that they can be successful. I mean, that's what we're all striving for. So, so Elliot, one last thing I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the sensory elements of Wonder Books that you've brought in that might help support kids who have sensory processing challenges?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. If you look at a regular book here, and this is what I was originally hired to do, is how do you make this more accessible? It's got pages and it's got a cover. There's not a lot of room here to make this multi-sensory.
Right.
And that was actually one of the reasons we chose to make digital books instead of paper books very early on. In the digital space, there's a lot more interesting things we can do. So you probably couldn't see it in the example because it was on a laptop. But one of the first things that I did, and I knew this came exactly from my work with the Star Center, was every time you turn a page, it vibrates on the highest level of vibration. It goes it's like almost a shock to the body. Like, you know, when you talk to kids and parents, I don't think they fully understand it. Now your kids would, but like there is a moment. There's like a moment where they can refocus all their energy because it stimulates them in all these other senses. Because as we were talking, it's like, you know, text is a pretty intense visual stimuli, and even that, it's like a specific type of visual stimuli.
Right.
And so to be able to have this like moment where not only does it vibrate, but they have to like tear the page up. You hear a tearing sound, and then it goes off the screen, and then it vibrates a lot. It creates these transitions where kids are able to refocus every other 2 or 3 sentences instead of, I don't know, you finish the book and go get a cup of water. That's a lot longer moment.
Yeah. And if there was a child who found the vibration not as alerting or not positively alerting, is there a way to turn it down at all?
Yeah, that's been one of our top requests from some parents right now. They're like, my kid's table keeps vibrating every morning. Like, could you please fix the vibration? So we're putting in an update in the patch that you can turn on and off, or you can change the level of volume and you can change the vibration level as well.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, thanks for that info. Elliot, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today. And I'll look forward to hopefully launching some kind of webinar where you can tell us a little bit more in depth about the development and the studies that you've conducted regarding the effectiveness of this reading program.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate you contributing so much to the community.
Thanks.